One of the things I want to do is make it so that the camera will follow our player if we enter combat, or just so the player can move around the camera at all. And I do have a main camera here. I created this camera manager script. So in here, I want to start with just being able to hold down like the right mouse button, for instance, to move our camera around. And we'll try 120 and see how that works, and we can change that number if we'd like. This is going to be the speed that we move our camera. And we're going to want to put this on the update method. And this can be private. And I'm using the just a simple input dot get mouse button down. I know Unity does have like a new input system. This is still based off of the old one, so you can adjust that based on your preference. Within this, I'm going to need to get the X and Y axis of the mouse, and then I'm going to use a transform.translate to move the camera around. And it's .get axis, and this one will be mouse X, and we're going to multiply that by our speed that we created up top, and then also by time.delta time. Now I'm going to copy and paste that line, and I'm just going to do the same thing, but it's going to be move Y and mouse Y. So now we have values for when we move the mouse up, down, left, or right. Now we need to move the camera based on the mouse movement. And that's actually pretty simple. It's just transform.translate. And I think we're going to use negative on here. Just because I think, if I remember correctly, it's backwards if I do the positive. So let's check that out, and we can test our speed as well. So it's moving, but only when I'm clicking. So the reason is I put get mouse button down. We just want to do get mouse button, because get mouse button down only does the first frame. Now I can move everything, and this actually looks pretty good. If we adjust this, let's do 100. I mean, that doesn't look bad either. So you can play around with it a bit, find something that works for you. I think 120 was fine, so I'll probably stick with that. The next thing I want to do is I want to have a button to center the camera on our guy if I just press a button. Like, so if we're like up here or really far away, I don't want to keep scrolling over to get back to my guy and find it. So In order to do that one, I'm going to create another header just to organize everything. And I will call this centering parameters. I think that's a good name. So we're probably going to have to find the position of the player if we're going to center it on him. So public transform player, and I'm going to leave this public, or it could be a private actually. So let's do it that way. I'm just going to drag the player in here, but we could also do like a start method where we find the player. If that's necessary, we can update this later. And I'll show you what I mean when we get back to the interface. We'll also have a private float for, let's do center speed, since we already used the speed value. And I'll just do 0.25f. And this will be like the speed camera centers. I'm going to do a lerp, and I'm going to do it so that when a true-false statement is true, then things will start moving. So let's do a private bool. We'll call it centering, and we'll start it off as false. So let's do public void center on player. And then in here we'll say if player is not equal to null. That way we make sure we have this guy identified. Let's do vector 3 current position equals transform dot position. So this is going to get current position of camera. And then we're going to need the X and Y position of our player. Similar to how we got like the axis up here, we're just going to do a float, and we could do like player X, or I could target X might be better. And then we're going to lerp that, which is this method here. Linearly interlopes between, I said that wrong, interpolates between A and B by T. So what that means is it's going to basically move it from point A to point B at a timeline of float T, if that makes sense. So if it's a car going from the beginning of the street to the end of the street, the T would define how quickly that car moves between those points to get to from the beginning to the end. And that was the center speed. And then I'm going to do target Y, current position Y, lowercase y, player position dot Y. Alright. And this is the lerp values of target positions. Probably a better description could be written, but that's basically what it is. So we have transform dot position. This is where we're actually going to move our camera. Update camera position. So we have our transform position will equal a new vector 3, and then we're going to put in our target X, our target Y, and our current position dot Z, because we don't want the Z to move. Basically, what this is saying is this is going to run like similarly to an update frame or update method, where it's not just one frame, it's going to keep going. So it's going to run itself multiple times. And it's going to take this camera position. So say our position is like 10 by 10. It's going to also find the player position. Let's say it's at 0 by 0. This is going to change its value based on these two positions. So it's going to find like 10 and 0, and then it's going to like start having like this smooth transition from 10 to 0, and it moves, or it actually changes that position from this line here. So this is just getting the values, and then this is actually doing the work of those values. So right now, this isn't actually going to do anything because we need something to trigger it. So we could put it in the update. I'm going to put it in a late update. And let's just do like another input. So let's do 2. So that'll be my middle mouse click, is get mouse button 2. So 0 would be your left click, 1 would be your right click, 2 would be your middle mouse click. So I know we were going to do if centering is true, then we're going to center the player. So I think the best way to do this is to have like a coroutine to have like a timer on how long centering is true. And we could just write that down here. And that is an I enumerator. And this is kind of just like being able to use a timer to trigger things. And we'll call this center player time. And then I'll put a float here for seconds. And we'll say centering is true. And then we'll also say centering is false. And we want a timer in between. So to do that is yield return new, wait for seconds, and then it will be the seconds that we wrote right there. And then we can go back up here and start our coroutine, which is going to be center player time. And then we're going to put the amount of seconds in there. If we're going to click like the middle mouse button or like spacebar or whatever it is to center our camera, I want it to be relatively quick. So maybe like a quarter of a second. So this will be true for like a quarter of a second, and then it'll be false. And here's our center speed. We'll see how quick that goes, if that works, because we can always adjust that one. And I'll serialize that speed so we can see it in our inspector. We'll do that so we can see the centering also. Why not? Okay, so I can move my camera around. Now I'm going to click the middle mouse button. I'm not getting anything. So let's figure out what's happening here. We never found our player. That's what's happening. So I could drag him in here. Like I said, we could also just find him by his tag, which is probably best. So I think we did something similar here. Yeah, find player game object. So let's add that into a start method real quick. And can we do that with a transform? There we go. So we can do, we'll find the player based off of the tag and get his transform. And then we don't have to worry about dragging it in the inspector. That way if our player changes for whatever reason, or we have like a better system to choose different characters to play as, it's just going to find the one with that tag. Okay, so if I just click that middle mouse, yeah, it snaps back pretty quickly. Try to get real far away. Yeah, so I think that's pretty good for being able to snap back. The other thing I want to do is make it so we click. I don't need to move the camera for like the rooms we've been to or even empty rooms, but I think it would be important that if you run into enemies, we auto move the camera there, focus on the battle that's happening. That way if the player, I don't know, like misclicks or something and we're off screen, he's getting attacked, you know, he or she is aware of what's going on. So I'm going to do serialize field, and I'm going to do I'm going to find the camera. So private camera, I'll call it cam, and we could find the camera equals game object at find game object with tag. It's the capital game object, and I think it's main camera, and camera dot find dot get camera. So we're finding the game object of the camera with a component camera. I think that's correct. Okay, so over here, when we click on an object, we are checking to see if the room is locked, if we can move our character, and if the enemy is inside of that room, and if we go into combat. So I want to do, if we go into combat, move camera to combat. And that should be our cam dot, it might be, I think we're going to start a coroutine, right? So let's look at our camera here. Center player time. So we'll turn centering true, it'll run this. Okay, I think that's our best bet. So start coroutine, and I think we can do cam dot, oops, center player time, parentheses, let's do 2 seconds, and then see why this is angry at us. Contain a definition. Oh, okay. We want the camera manager, not just the camera. Camera manager. Same thing. It's just camera manager, not camera. That makes a lot more sense. Okay. Yeah, let's see how that looks. So here's this. Let's go to cool. The one thing I don't like is that it's so low. So let's try raising the camera up a little bit when we center it. Center on player, let's just add 2. I'll put parentheses around here. I don't think I really need them, but it's more organized. Okay, so we click here, we reveal this room, go to the next one. Cool, I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, now when I, snap my camera, it goes right back. The only other thing I'm noticing is that a lot of my room is one-way, like one-sided textures. So that's just something to keep in mind for your game. I will have to correct that and make them double-sided or add something around the level, which I plan on doing later on. But the camera is looking pretty good. The only other issue I noticed is I can just keep going and going and going and going and going until I censor it, and that's probably not great, so we should set up some boundaries. We're gonna have to set some boundaries. Let's do level boundaries. And I'm going to do more serialized fields. And we'll just do a private float boundary y minimum. Yeah, let's do it that way. Y minimum, y max, x minimum, and x max. That way we could change this in the inspector if our level is bigger or smaller, or if we're trying to do something more complex. We could change it here instead of hard coding it. So I wanted to affect the update because it's probably not going to affect the player centering because our player should never be outside of the level anyway. Yeah, let's do this in an organized way and have a separate private void stay in boundary. And then we'll run that from our update method. So when we click and drag our mouse around, we will have to also run this stay in boundary. And I'm just going to try to keep this as simple as possible. So if transform.position.x is less than boundary minimum, then our transform.position will equal a new vector 3. And then we'll have our boundary minimum. And then we got to put it in our current y and z, which would just be like this transform.position.y and this transform.position.z. And then we could copy this and make sure we correct this. So I'm going to change this one to max. And I'm going to change this one here to max as well. So boundary x max to new vector 3, boundary x max. We're also going to have to change this from less than to greater than. So if transform position x is greater than boundary x max, then we're going to set our position to the x max. Same thing down here, transform position y to boundary y minimum. Then we'll change it to this dot transform dot position dot x, and then make sure you change the y position to the minimum y. And then for the last one, we're going to make it greater than, make sure it's transform y, and it will be y max. And we will replace our y position, and we will replace the x position. And then we're going to read it real quick and make sure we didn't mess up. So if our x position is less than our minimum x, set it to minimum x. If it's greater than max x, set to max x. If it's less than minimum x or minimum y, we change the y. If it's greater than the y max, we change that. And then that's running in our update. So I think that's good. Oh, we never set our values. So let's check our camera position out. We're at 6 and 4 right now. So let's say that's kind of like the beginning of the level, -7. So our minimum x will be -7. If we move it, I mean, I want my level to be probably longer, but we'll just say, I don't know, 30. We'll try that out. We can always adjust it. So x is 30. And then our y, maybe we'll have a floor underneath at some point. So maybe it can't go past -2. We'll probably have a second floor, maybe a third. So maybe 15. So -2 and 15. Okay. So we'll hit play. So if you look at the values up here at x and y, I can't drag past that, which is exactly what we want. I can't go down, even if I like try to slingshot it, I can't get past -7 or -2. And then, yep, same thing on this side and same thing in this corner. So, awesome. And then we can center it. That's exactly what I want. And I'd also would like it so that we could zoom in and out. And then I think we'll be good with the camera. To do the camera zoom scrolling, let's do another header. Keep it organized. Camera zoom scrolling. And we're going to have a private float. We'll need the speed for how fast we're going to zoom in and out. Just put 10 for now. We'll need probably a float for the boundaries for like a z axis, because we don't want to zoom in too far or zoom out too far. And we'll have a private float. This will be for how smooth things will move in between, I guess, like mouse scrolling. And we'll probably keep it a low number, and we'll adjust that if we need to. So this will be and I also tested out like my late update for what we're doing. I think it's fine to keep everything just in the regular update. So if we were doing something a little more complex, sure, we could do it that way, but for what we're doing, it's fine in the update. And we could label this out a little bit better. And then the mouse button 2 was our Oh, that was also used for centering the camera. So hold button to move the camera, and then I'll just put scrolling slash zooming camera, and then I will put one more method in here. I'll put it at the bottom, and we'll just call it private void scrolling. And then we'll just put that there. Similar to up here where we got the move X and move Y based on our mouse X and Y positions. We could paste that if you want, or you could type it out. We're going to need the scroll positioning, which should be mouse scroll wheel. Now to verify that, it would be over here in our project settings, input manager, mouse scroll wheel. So this is the input that we're trying to detect here. And you can see we have our mouse Y and our mouse X here as well. And this sensitivity could also be adjusted. So we verified our name is correct. Make sure you don't make something lowercase that shouldn't. It's a good idea to just copy and paste that because it won't work. Alright, so we got our scroll. We don't need to multiply this here. And then here we want to lerp our scroll amount and move camera position Z within boundaries. So we'll need a vector 3 again. We'll do the current position like we did right here. So let's just grab that. Don't mind me, just trying to organize. And then we'll get, I think we did our target X and Y up here, so we're just going to do a target Z. And we need to figure out how we're going to lerp this. So we want to do our current position Z. So I guess just to show you what I want to do. So we want to just move the camera, not that far, just in and out like this when we scroll. Just something pretty basic. So we're going to need to move it from our current position minus the scroll amount, or we could add it possibly. Let's add the scroll amount times our zoom speed, and then this should be our smooth speed. So basically what we're doing here is we are grabbing the current position, which right now is 15, and then we want to move it by however much. Say our scroll affects it by 1, so this would be like 16 times zoom speed, which we made that 10, so 160, and we're just going to smoothly move to that point. Now, those numbers might not make sense, but we are going to play test it, and hopefully it will make more sense. So like before, that describes the value for float target Z. let's do transform dot position equals new vector 3, and we're doing current position dot x, current position dot y, and then this one will be our target z position. Okay, so let's see how that goes. It's moving, it's pretty slow. I can't edit the values because I didn't put them here. So let's head back over here. We have our zoom scrolling, private floats. So that's pretty slow. Let's try 100. It's a lot better. So, I was talking about the numbers earlier. So I said like this would be potentially 16 times 10. I don't think this is a value of 1. If we go back and look at our sensitivity in here, I think it is 0.1. And even that return value might be different. So we could check that by doing a debug.log scroll. Yeah, so that's 0.1. And if we keep this at 100, so that's pretty much our scroll speed. So this should be zoom multiplier. Let's label that a little better, because it looks like that's just affecting the speed, the same as the smooth speed. So the other thing we are missing that we haven't changed yet is the boundaries. So I could potentially zoom all the way to the back of the room here and through the level, or I can make everybody look like ants. That's not what we want. So right here, I will type in float scroll position z equals, and we could do something similar to this. Like I could just add in dot z, boundary z, do the vector 3 again. But another way to do that is using mathf.clamp, and either way should work. You can mess around and see what looks a little smoother for you. And our value that we are clamping, we're going to clamp this target z so that it does not go above or below our boundaries. So we had boundary z, minimum and max. And then we need to use the value that we just made, and that will go here. So let's check that out. You notice we're at 0 because I didn't define anything. So let's just put negative 100 and 100 right now, and then we'll figure out what looks best. Okay, I don't want to go beyond this point, which looks like it's like maybe negative 9. Maybe 10 should be our limit, so negative 10. And then maybe negative 20. Let me go full screen. maybe about there, which would be negative 28. So we could just do negative 10 and negative 30. Let's see how that looks. Might have done that backwards. Oh, yeah, because we're in negative numbers, so minimum negative 30 is smaller than negative 10. Okay, so I'm trying to zoom in further. I cannot zoom in any further if I try, and then if I zoom out, it looks like it's not letting me go any further. Let's look at our values up here. Yep, it clamps us at those two values, so that's awesome. And we can zoom while moving around too, which is kind of cool. I can center it while I'm trying to move around. So it looks like everything's working pretty well. Right now our smooth speed isn't doing too much, and I'd like to try an eye enumerator and see if we can get that to be a little smoother. I took away the serial field for these because we don't really need to adjust them at all. That was more for debug purposes having it there. Currently, like, this is always running, which for what we're doing isn't necessarily terrible, but um, you don't want something always unnecessarily, you know, running code that doesn't need to be. We could um, continue to get our input, but then we should say something like if scroll dot, well, it's a float, and we know it's going to be negative 0.1 or 0.1 when we use it. So if scroll is greater than 0, or scroll is less than 0, so if it's changed, if it's not 0, I mean, that's another way to do it. If scroll is not 0, then we run all this. Now that makes a lot more sense than just having it constantly run all this code for no reason. Start coroutine scrolling routine, and I mean, when you scroll the mouse, it's like a quarter of a second. That's not how you do that. There we go. So we start that coroutine, and then we say if scrolling is true, and then we can do all this. Yeah, so this is a lot cleaner than what we were doing. And if we set our smooth speed to 0.025, we should have a nice smoother zoom, which I like this much better than what we had. And I can still like zoom faster, but it is a bit smoother. And we can adjust this too. We try 0.1. Yeah, that looks even better. So things are a lot smoother that way. So 0.01. So I changed the current position that was over here because it wasn't calculating correctly. When we were trying to scroll, it was just still instantly going there, and that's because we were using this calculation inside of our scrolling, which was like, this is like updating every frame and over the course of a quarter second. But if we think about this as like 25 seconds, when we had the current position plus the scroll times the zoom multiplier, it was updating along with every second along the way. So if it was at 0 seconds, that's the starting point, which is good. But then if it got to 20 seconds, this value was changing along with where we were trying to transition. So it was basically not working. But by putting it outside of here, say this gets to 20 seconds, this value is still saved at when we first scroll the wheel up or down. So this value is still saved at 0 seconds rather than like 20 seconds in, or in our case, 0.20 seconds in. So the only other thing I did was I did clean this up and just make this a private float. And one other thing I noticed for our camera, when we go to center it, I think it was moving a little too fast. So I think we should change the center speed to maybe like 0.075. And maybe that's something you can just play with. And just try to make it a little smoother. And if you go too far, it's not going to reach. So maybe 0.05. That seems pretty good. But it doesn't just snap to it. You have that nice transition, and that's really the goal that we're going for with this. But I think that looks good for our camera system, and I think we can finally make an attempt to battle some aliens and robots.